A love that defied the odds. The small town of Millbrook had never been one for change. It was the kind of place where families had lived for generations, where everyone knew everyone else's business, and where tradition was held onto with an iron grip. So when Johnny Miller, the son of a respected businessman, announced he was marrying Ashley Carter, a poor black woman with nothing but a dream, the town erupted in whispers and laughter. "He's throwing his future away," they murmured behind his back. "A woman like that, she'll never amount to anything. She's got stars in her eyes, but no real plan." Johnny heard the whispers, the laughter, and the ridicule, but he didn't care. He saw something in Ashley that no one else did, an unshakable determination, a fire that refused to be extinguished despite the odds stacked against her. She wasn't just another girl with dreams. She was a fighter, someone who refused to be confined by the limitations the world tried to impose on her. Ashley, on the other hand, had spent her entire life proving people wrong. She had grown up in a small apartment on the rough side of town, raised by a single mother who worked long hours cleaning houses just to put food on the table. But no matter how hard life got, Ashley never stopped dreaming. She wanted to be a model, not for the fame, not for the money, but because she had never seen anyone who looked like her in the magazines and billboards that lined the streets of the city. She wanted to be that girl, the one who proved that beauty came in all shades, that dreams weren't just reserved for the privileged. The first time Johnny saw Ashley, she had walked into his small diner on the edge of town, her shoulders stiff with pride, despite the worn-out coat she wore. She had only ordered a coffee, black, but something about her had caught his attention, the way she held herself, as if she belonged in a world that refused to accept her. She had smiled at him then, and something in Johnny had shifted. That smile, that determination, it was something rare, something that spoke of resilience and hope. Johnny had spent his whole life surrounded by people who played it safe, who never dared to dream bigger than the town they were born in. But Ashley, she was different, and Johnny wanted to know more. A town that didn't understand. It started as friendship, long conversations over late-night dinners in Johnny's diner, where Ashley would share stories of her childhood, of how she used to practice her runway walk in front of the mirror, of how she had been rejected time and time again at auditions but refused to give up. Johnny listened, fascinated. He had never met anyone so passionate, so unwilling to let the world break them down. Somewhere along the way, friendship turned into something deeper. Johnny had never intended to fall in love, but how could he not? Every time Ashley spoke about her dreams, her eyes lit up in a way that made the rest of the world fade away. When he told his family about Ashley, their reactions were less than supportive. A model. Really, Johnny? That's not a real career. She's got nothing to her name. You could do better. Think about your future, son. A respectable businessman doesn't marry a girl like that. Johnny had clenched his fists, fighting the anger that surged inside him. It wasn't just about Ashley's career. They disapproved because of her background, because she didn't fit the image of the woman they had envisioned for him. But Johnny didn't care. He loved Ashley, and he was going to marry her. The proposal that shocked the town. Johnny proposed on a quiet evening, under the old oak tree in the town park, the very place where they had shared their first kiss. He had been nervous, his hand sweating as he pulled the small velvet box from his pocket. Ashley had gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Johnny, are you sure?" she had whispered, her voice trembling. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Johnny had replied. Tears had welled up in her eyes as she nodded. Yes, yes. But the town was less than thrilled. The news of their engagement spread like wildfire, and instead of congratulations, they were met with judgment and skepticism. She's just using him for his money. What does she even bring to the table? That girl will never be a model. She's just chasing a fantasy. Ashley heard every word, but she refused to let it break her. Johnny, however, had a harder time ignoring it. He could feel the shift in the way people looked at him. the pity in their eyes, as if he were making the biggest mistake of his life. Even his best friend, Mike, pulled him aside one evening. "Johnny, man, I'm just saying, she's got her head in the clouds. You really think she's gonna make it as a model? Be serious." Johnny's jaw had clenched. "I believe in her, Mike. Why is that so hard for everyone else to do?" Mike had sighed, shaking his head. "Because, Johnny, dreams like that don't come true for people like her." But Johnny refused to believe that. A wedding without a blessing. The day of their wedding arrived, and instead of the grand celebration most couples dreamed of, Johnny and Ashley found themselves exchanging vows in front of a handful of friends and distant relatives. His parents didn't come. Neither did most of his childhood friends. The empty pews in the church were a painful reminder of the rejection they faced, but as Johnny looked into Ashley's eyes, all of that faded away. "I don't care what anyone else thinks," Johnny whispered as he slid the ring onto her finger. "You're my forever, Ashley." She squeezed his hands, her own trembling. "And you're mine." They kissed, sealing their love in the face of every doubt, every whisper, every disapproving look. They were in this together. As they stepped outside, the wind cool against their skin, Ashley turned to Johnny, her voice soft. "We'll prove them wrong." Johnny smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No, sweetheart, you'll prove them wrong. And I'll be right there beside you when you do." Ashley leaned into him, closing her eyes. This was only the beginning. The struggle for a dream. Ashley and Johnny's honeymoon wasn't a lavish getaway to Paris or a beachside retreat in the Bahamas. It was a weekend trip to a cozy cabin just outside Millbrook, a gift from Johnny's former high school teacher, Mr. Lewis, one of the few people who believed in their love. They spent those 2 days wrapped in each other's arms, making plans, dreaming about the future, and, for the first time in months, forgetting about the judgment that awaited them back home. But reality came knocking the moment they returned to town. The whispers hadn't stopped. The side glances hadn't faded. And the struggle? It had only just begun. Ashley was still chasing a dream the world refused to take seriously. Johnny was still running a business in a town that had turned its back on him. And both of them were beginning to realize that love, while powerful, wouldn't be enough to shield them from the hardships ahead. The cold shoulder of a small town. Millbrook had always prided itself on its close-knit community. But as Johnny and Ashley walked down Main Street together, the warmth that once greeted Johnny had turned to indifference, and in some cases, outright hostility. Mrs. Thompson, the owner of the local grocery store, who used to chat with Johnny about his diner's success, now barely acknowledged his presence. When Ashley reached for a carton of eggs, Mrs. Thompson's gaze lingered a second too long. Her lips pursed as if she had swallowed something bitter. Down the road, Mr. Evans, the butcher who had always given Johnny the best cuts for his restaurant, suddenly claimed he had run out of fresh meat whenever Johnny stopped by. Even Johnny's regulars at the diner began to dwindle. Some left without explanation. Others made excuses, trying out the new place on the east side, or cutting back on eating out. Johnny wasn't stupid. He knew what was happening. And it wasn't just about Ashley being black, or about her being poor. It was about her refusing to stay in her place. A black woman daring to dream big, daring to believe she could be something more than a waitress or a housekeeper. That was too much for Millbrook, and by choosing to love her, Johnny had become an outsider in his own home. Ashley's battle for a chance. Ashley knew that if she wanted to be a model, she couldn't rely on the town for support. So she looked beyond it. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, dressed in the best outfit she could afford, and made the 2-hour trip to the city for casting calls. She walked into rooms filled with women who fit the industry's narrow definition of beauty. Tall, fair-skinned, delicate features. Ashley was stunning, but in a different way. Her deep brown skin glowed with radiance. Her full lips and high cheekbones gave her a regal beauty, and her walk carried the confidence of a woman who refused to be overlooked. But time and time again, she was You have a unique look, but we're going in a different direction. We love your energy, but we're not sure there's a market for your type. Not quite what we're looking for." Each rejection felt like a punch to the gut. Each closed door reminded her of what the world had always tried to tell her: this isn't for you. And every time she came home empty-handed, Johnny could see the exhaustion in her eyes. One evening, after yet another failed audition, Ashley curled up on the couch, silent. Johnny sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her knee. "Talk to me, Ash," he said gently. She exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. "I knew this wouldn't be easy, Johnny, but I didn't think it would be this hard. They don't even see me." Johnny took her hand in his. "Then we'll make them see you." Ashley looked at him, searching his eyes. "How?" Johnny grinned. "We'll build our own opportunity. A risk worth taking." That night, an idea took shape. Ashley didn't need the approval of agencies who refused to give her a chance. If they wouldn't see her, she would make them see her. With Johnny's encouragement, she started reaching out to photographers, small brands, and independent designers who were willing to collaborate. She spent every penny she could spare on professional photo shoots, updating her portfolio, and submitting her work to online modeling platforms. Johnny transformed a section of their tiny living room into a makeshift studio, where Ashley practiced her poses, her expressions, her walk. And slowly, things started to shift. Her photos gained traction online. Small businesses reached out for local campaigns. A boutique in the city asked her to model their fall collection. They weren't big opportunities, but they were something. Something to prove that she wasn't crazy for believing in herself. Something to prove that she belonged in this world. And as her career began to take its first shaky steps, Johnny found himself fighting his own battles. The restaurant war. The diner had been Johnny's pride and joy. He had built it from the ground up, pouring in his blood, sweat, and countless sleepless nights. It had once been the town's favorite spot, a place where everyone gathered for home-cooked meals and good company. But ever since he married Ashley, business had taken a hit. The seats that were once always full now sat empty. The laughter and chatter that once filled the air had turned into silence. And Johnny knew why. Some customers still came, people who didn't care about town politics, who valued his food and service. But many had stopped coming altogether, choosing to eat at the new diner that had conveniently opened across town, run by a man who made it clear that he only served real Millbrook folk. Johnny could have fought back, could have lowered prices, run promotions, tried to win back the customers who had abandoned him. But he didn't, because he didn't want their money. Not if it came at the cost of his values. Not if it meant turning his back on the woman he loved. And so, he kept cooking. For the loyal customers who stayed. For Ashley, who came home every night, tired but still fighting. And for himself. Because even if the town had turned its back on him, he refused to let it break him. A decision that would change everything. One night, as they lay in bed, Ashley turned to Johnny, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his arm. "What if we left, Johnny?" she whispered. Johnny's breath hitched. "Left?" She nodded. "What if we started fresh somewhere else? Somewhere that doesn't care about our love, our dreams. Somewhere that lets us just be." Johnny stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. Could they leave? Could they walk away from the only life they had ever known? His diner. Her dream. Their home. But then he thought about the whispers. The cold shoulders. The empty chairs in his restaurant. The rejection Ashley faced every day. And suddenly, staying didn't seem so appealing anymore. Ashley turned to him, waiting. Johnny exhaled, turned to face her, and smiled. "Let's do it." And just like that, their lives changed forever. The leap of faith. Leaving wasn't easy. Millbrook had been their home for their entire lives. It was the place where Johnny had built his diner from the ground up, where Ashley had taken her first hopeful steps toward her dream. It was where they had fallen in love, fought against the odds, and stood strong against a town that refused to believe in them. But Millbrook was also the place that had tried to break them. It was the place that turned its back on Johnny the moment he chose love over tradition. It was the place that dismissed Ashley's dreams before she ever had a chance to prove herself. And now it was time to leave it all behind. Breaking the news. When Johnny told his parents about the move, their reactions were exactly what he expected. His mother pursed her lips, setting her teacup down with a little too much force. "Leaving? You're just going to throw everything away. The restaurant, your customers, your future." Johnny let out a slow breath. He had expected resistance, but hearing the disappointment in her voice still stung. "Mom, there's nothing left for us here. My business has suffered ever since Ashley and I got married, and you know why." His father crossed his arms, his expression hard. Maybe if she had focused on her real job instead of some foolish modeling nonsense, things would have been different. Johnny's fists clenched at his sides, but before he could respond, Ashley stepped forward. "With all due respect, sir, my dream isn't nonsense." Her voice was calm but firm. "And Johnny isn't throwing anything away. He's choosing a life where we don't have to fight for basic respect." His father scoffed. "And where exactly do you think you're going to go? You think the city's going to welcome you with open arms? You're dreaming, girl." Ashley lifted her chin. "Dreams are all I've ever had, and I refuse to give up now." Johnny squeezed her hand, pride swelling in his chest. "We're leaving next week." His mother looked at him, eyes full of sadness. "And what if you fail, Johnny?" He smiled, though there was a weight in his chest. "Then at least we tried." And with that, the conversation was over. Goodbyes and cold shoulders. Word of their departure spread through Millbrook like wildfire. Some people congratulated them, mostly out of politeness. Others barely concealed their relief, as if they had been waiting for this moment all along. Mike, Johnny's old friend, shook his head when he heard the news. "You really think the big city's gonna treat you any better?" he asked. Johnny didn't bother arguing. There was nothing left to say. When Ashley walked into Mrs. Thompson's store for the last time, the older woman gave her a tight-lipped smile. "Well, good luck to you," she said, but her tone made it clear she didn't believe Ashley would make it. Ashley smiled anyway. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I'll send you a postcard." The woman's face darkened, but Ashley was already walking away. They packed their things, sold whatever they couldn't carry, and loaded up Johnny's old truck. And just like that, with nothing but a couple of suitcases and a head full of dreams, they left Millbrook behind. A new beginning in the city. The city was overwhelming. Towering skyscrapers, endless traffic, the constant hum of life. It was nothing like the slow, predictable rhythm of Millbrook. Johnny and Ashley moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of old coffee and fresh paint. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Johnny wasted no time looking for work. He had run his own diner, but getting a job in a city full of experienced chefs wasn't easy. Most places either didn't take him seriously or wanted him to start as a low-level cook at minimum wage. Ashley, meanwhile, threw herself into auditions. She walked into casting calls with her head high, her portfolio in hand, and hope burning in her chest. But the rejections kept coming. "You have a striking look, but we're looking for something different. You're beautiful, but we're going in another direction. We love your confidence, but we're not sure there's a demand for your style." Ashley tried to stay strong, but each rejection chipped away at her. One night, she came home and collapsed onto their small couch, burying her face in her hands. Johnny sat beside her, rubbing slow circles on her back. "Talk to me, Ash." She looked up, tears shining in her eyes. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I thought leaving Millbrook would make things easier, but it's just more of the same. Nobody wants to give me a chance." Johnny cupped her face gently. "Then we'll make them see you." She let out a soft, shaky laugh. "You keep saying that, Johnny. But how?" He grinned. By doing what we do best. We work harder. We find another way. And so they did. Building a name from nothing. Ashley stopped waiting for opportunities and started creating them. She found small-time photographers who were just as hungry for success as she was, trading free work for professional shots to build her portfolio. She posted her photos on social media, using every connection she had to get noticed. Johnny, meanwhile, took a job at a struggling diner, working long hours in a tiny kitchen for barely enough pay. But he treated every plate like it was art, pouring love into every meal he cooked. And slowly, their hard work started to pay off. Ashley's social media presence grew. A few online brands reached out for small gigs. A local boutique invited her to model for a fashion show. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Johnny's cooking became the talk of the diner. Customers started requesting his dishes, and soon, the owner offered him a raise. It wasn't overnight success. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was progress. And then, one day, everything changed. A chance encounter that changed everything. Ashley was walking home from a photo shoot when a woman stopped her on the street. She was tall, elegant, and carried herself with an air of quiet authority. "Excuse me," the woman said, studying Ashley. "Are you a model?" Ashley hesitated. "I'm trying to be." The woman's lips curled into a smile. "Well, you just caught a very lucky break." She handed Ashley a business card. Victoria Lane, fashion director, the Elite Modeling Agency. Ashley's breath caught. This was one of the biggest agencies in the industry. The woman's eyes gleamed. "I have an open call next week. I want you there." Ashley's hand shook as she took the card. I'll be there." Victoria winked. "Good. Let's see if you have what it takes." As Ashley walked home, her heart pounded. This was it, the chance she had been waiting for. She burst into their apartment, breathless. "Johnny, you won't believe what just happened." Johnny grinned, pulling her into his arms. "Tell me." And as she told him everything, her voice full of excitement, Johnny realized something. They had left Millbrook behind. And now, the world was finally starting to see them. When the world starts to notice, Ashley barely slept the night before her meeting with Victoria Lane, the powerful fashion director who had given her the card. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing. This was it. The opportunity she had fought for, struggled for, left everything behind for. And she was terrified. Johnny, lying beside her, sensed her unease. He turned on his side, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You okay, Ash?" he murmured, his voice groggy with sleep. She let out a soft sigh. "What if I mess this up? What if I get there, and they realize I'm not good enough?" Johnny propped himself up on one elbow, his eyes steady on hers. "Ashley Carter," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You are the strongest, most determined woman I've ever met. You didn't come this far to doubt yourself now." Ashley swallowed the lump in her throat. "But Johnny, what if?" He pressed a finger to her lips, silencing her. "No what ifs. Just go in there and show them who you are." She closed her eyes and exhaled. "Okay," she whispered. And for the first time that night, she let sleep take her. A seat at the table. The next morning, Ashley stood outside Elite Modeling Agency in a black pencil dress, her hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. The building loomed before her, its glass doors reflecting the busy city streets. She adjusted her bag, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The lobby was buzzing with models, agents, and photographers, all speaking in hushed tones. Everyone there looked polished, expensive, effortless. Ashley, despite her confidence, suddenly felt small. A receptionist glanced up. "Name." Ashley cleared her throat. "Ashley Carter. I have an appointment with Victoria Lane." The receptionist nodded and gestured toward a sleek leather couch. "Have a seat. She'll be with you shortly." Ashley sat, clutching her portfolio so tightly her knuckles turned white. Around her, other models waited, some whispering nervously, others radiating cool confidence. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, finally, Ashley Carter. Ashley stood so fast she nearly knocked over the table in front of her. Victoria Lane smiled as she approached. She was dressed in a tailored suit, her movements precise and effortless. "Come with me." Ashley followed her into a conference room, where a panel of agents and casting directors sat waiting. A long table stretched between them, and for a split second, Ashley felt like she was being put on trial. Victoria gestured for Ashley to sit. "Tell me, Ashley," she said, folding her hands on the table. "Why should we take a chance on you?" Ashley hesitated for only a moment before she found her voice. "Because I've been fighting for this my entire life," she said, her voice steady. "I know what it means to hear no 100 times and still wake up every morning believing in yourself. I know what it means to be overlooked, dismissed, told you don't belong. And yet, I'm still here. Because I believe in what I bring to the table. And I won't stop until the world sees it too." The room fell silent. Victoria studied her for a long moment, then leaned back in her chair, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Show us what you've got." Ashley stood, smoothing out her dress, and began walking as if she were on a runway. Not just walking, owning the space. Every step was deliberate. Every movement was controlled. She let the confidence radiate off her. Let them see the strength, the fire, the unstoppable force that was Ashley Carter. When she reached the end of the imaginary runway, she turned, locking eyes with Victoria. And Victoria Lane grinned. "You're in," she said. Ashley's breath caught. "Welcome to Elite. The rise of Ashley Carter." That meeting changed everything. Within weeks, Ashley was booked for local campaigns. Within months, she was walking in New York fashion shows. And within a year, she was featured in major magazines. Her face was suddenly everywhere. Billboards, advertisements, editorials. The same industry that once told her she wasn't what they were looking for was now calling her the new face of fashion. And people were watching. Not just in the industry, not just in the city, but back home in Millbrook. The same town that had laughed at her. The same people who whispered behind her back. The same folks who never believed in her. Now, they couldn't ignore her. The town that never saw her coming. One afternoon, Johnny received a text from Mike. "Dude, is Ashley on a billboard in the city?" Johnny smirked. "She sure is." Mike didn't reply for a long time. Then, finally, "Damn." Then came the phone calls. The same people who once avoided them in the grocery store were suddenly eager to reconnect. Mrs. Thompson, who had once scoffed at Ashley's modeling dreams, now bragged about knowing her. Johnny's parents, who had doubted their love, suddenly wanted to visit. And one day, an unexpected letter arrived. It was from Johnny's father. "Johnny, I was wrong about Ashley. I see that now. I see everything now. I hope you'll forgive an old man for not seeing what was right in front of him all along. You made the right choice, son. Your mother and I would love to come visit." Johnny read the letter twice, his hand shaking. He wasn't sure if he was ready to forgive them. But one thing was clear. Ashley had changed more than just the industry. She had changed people. Even the ones who never believed in her. A love that never changed. One night, Ashley stood in front of the mirror in their apartment, wearing a gown designed by a famous brand she once dreamed of modeling for. She turned to Johnny. "Can you believe this?" she whispered. "Can you believe we're here?" Johnny walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He kissed her shoulder gently. "I always knew we'd get here, Ash," he said, "because you never gave up, and neither did we." Ashley turned in his arms, gazing up at him. "You never stopped believing in me." He smiled. "And I never will." Their love had survived everything. Judgment, rejection, struggle. And now, Now the world finally saw what Johnny had seen in Ashley all along. She was unstoppable. And this was only the beginning. The price of success. Ashley Carter was no longer just a small-town girl with a dream. She was a rising star. Fashion magazines called her the fresh face redefining beauty standards. Designers who once overlooked her were now lining up to work with her. The very industry that had told her not quite what we're looking for was suddenly using words like trailblazer and revolutionary. It was everything she had fought for, everything she had sacrificed for. But success came at a cost, and Ashley was beginning to realize that fame was a double-edged sword. The shift in their world. Life was changing at a pace neither she nor Johnny had ever imagined. Instead of waking up early for auditions, Ashley was now flying to Paris, Milan, and New York for exclusive photo shoots. Instead of local runway shows, she was strutting on the biggest fashion stages in the world. It was exhilarating, but it was also exhausting. Her schedule was relentless. Photo shoots at dawn, interviews at noon, brand meetings in the evening, and flights in between. Johnny, still managing his growing restaurant business, found himself seeing less and less of his wife. At first, he didn't mind. He was her biggest supporter. He knew this was her moment. But as the weeks turned into months, the quiet dinners they used to share became fewer. The long, heartfelt conversations turned into quick phone calls from different time zones. And one night, as Johnny sat alone at their dining table, staring at an untouched plate of food, he felt something he never thought he'd feel. Loneliness. Ashley was out there conquering the world. But was she leaving him behind? The whispering doubts. One evening, Ashley returned home from a trip to Paris. She was exhausted but buzzing with excitement. "Johnny, you won't believe it," she said, tossing her bags onto the floor as she wrapped her arms around him. "I got an offer for a global beauty campaign. This is huge." Johnny smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's amazing, Ash." She pulled back, studying his face. "What's wrong?" He hesitated. Was this the right time? Could he really bring up his feelings when she was finally achieving everything she had ever dreamed of? "Nothing," he said finally, forcing a grin. "Just tired." Ashley frowned but didn't push. She was too excited about her news to notice the crack forming between them. And Johnny. Johnny didn't want to ruin her happiness. The outside pressure. As Ashley's fame grew, so did the attention on their relationship. Reporters started asking questions. Who was the man behind Ashley Carter? At first, the headlines were sweet. "Meet Johnny Miller, the supportive husband behind fashion's newest icon." Ashley Carter's heart belongs to a small-town chef. But soon, the tone changed. His Ashley Carter's husband holding her back. Rumors swirl. Trouble in paradise for the fashion world's rising star. Paparazzi began following Johnny, snapping pictures of him at his restaurant, digging into his past, trying to find anything they could use. And worst of all, people in Ashley's industry began questioning their relationship. One night, after a particularly long event, a famous designer clinked his glass and smirked at Ashley. "Darling, you're too big for a small-town husband now. Why settle?" Ashley stiffened. "Excuse me." The designer laughed. "You're a global name now. Your life is here, in fashion. What does a restaurant owner from nowhere have to offer you?" Ashley's blood boiled. But before she could respond, her agent, Sarah, pulled her aside. "Ashley, you need to be careful," she said quietly. "Your relationship is starting to be seen as outdated. Some people are saying you're clinging to the past instead of moving forward." Ashley's jaw tightened. "Johnny isn't the past. He's my husband." Sarah sighed. "I know, but the industry is ruthless. People are watching. They want to see if you belong in this world, or if you're still attached to small-town dreams." Ashley was furious. But later that night, as she scrolled through social media, she couldn't ignore the growing number of comments. "She's too big for him now. She needs someone on her level. Johnny Miller. He'll be old news soon. For the first time, Ashley felt something she had never felt before. Fear. Was she really outgrowing Johnny? Or was the world just trying to convince her she was? The breaking point. One night, Johnny sat at home, waiting for Ashley. She had promised to be back for dinner. She wasn't. Hours passed. Finally, the front door opened. Ashley stepped inside, looking exhausted but glamorous. Her makeup still perfect from an event, a designer dress draped over her frame. "Johnny, I'm so sorry," she began, but he was already standing. "You forgot, didn't you?" Her heart sank. Forgot what? He exhaled, shaking his head. "Dinner. You said you'd be home." Ashley rubbed her temples. "Johnny, I had a last-minute meeting. It was important." He nodded, but his voice was tight. "And what about last week? And the week before?" "Ashley, I barely see you anymore." Her frustration flared. "Johnny, this is my career. This is what we fought for. Why are you acting like I'm the bad guy for finally succeeding?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not, Ashley. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being us." Silence. Ashley's throat tightened. "Johnny, are you saying you regret this? Us?" His eyes softened. "No, never." But then he sighed. "I just don't know if I fit into your world anymore." Her heart shattered. "Johnny, you're my world." He shook his head. "Then why does it feel like I'm losing you?" Ashley had no answer. Because for the first time, she didn't know if she was losing him, or if she was losing herself. And that terrified her more than anything else. Love, fame, and the fight to stay together. That night, as Ashley lay awake in bed beside Johnny, she made a decision. She couldn't let the world define their love. She couldn't let success steal the man who had been her rock. The next morning, she made a phone call. She canceled a campaign. She turned down an event. And instead, she walked into Johnny's restaurant, sat at the counter, and smiled at him like she had the first time she ever stepped into his diner. "What can I get?" she asked playfully. Johnny blinked, confused. "Ash, what are you doing here?" She reached across the counter, taking his hand. "Choosing us." His eyes softened. "Ashley, your career. We'll survive." She squeezed his hand. "But if I lose you, Johnny, I lose everything." His face broke into a slow, genuine smile. For the first time in months, Ashley felt at peace. Because fame was fleeting. But love was forever. And she wasn't going to let it slip away. The fight for love and legacy. Ashley Carter had fought against the odds for her dreams. She had defied expectations, broken barriers, and proved everyone wrong. But now she was fighting a different kind of battle. A battle for her marriage. A battle for balance. Because while the world saw her as a rising star, the woman in the mirror saw something else. A woman losing the very thing that had made her who she was. And if she wasn't careful, success would come at the cost of the one person who had believed in her before the world ever did. She wouldn't let that happen. She couldn't. So she made a choice. She would not just be Ashley Carter, the model. She would be Ashley Carter, the woman who refused to lose herself. And more importantly, she would be the wife Johnny deserved. Rebuilding what mattered. The decision to step back from the spotlight, even just a little, was not easy. Her agent, Sarah, was livid. "Ashley, you can't just start declining major campaigns. You're at your peak." Ashley's voice was calm but firm. "I'm not quitting, Sarah. I'm just making sure my success doesn't destroy my personal life." Sarah scoffed. "Plenty of models balance both." Ashley smiled wryly. "Plenty of models don't have a Johnny Miller waiting for them at home." Sarah sighed. "Just don't disappear completely. The industry moves fast, and people forget just as fast. They can forget me, but Johnny won't." Ashley said simply. And that was that. For the first time in months, She took control of her time. She chose her husband. She chose their love. And Johnny saw the shift instantly. She started showing up at the restaurant again, sitting at the counter like she used to, sipping coffee and watching him work. She started coming home earlier, curling up next to him on the couch instead of rushing off to another event. She chose their life, not just her career. And Johnny, he felt seen again. But Ashley knew one thing for certain. Choosing love once wasn't enough. She had to fight for it every single day. The return to Millbrook. One evening, as they sat on their apartment balcony overlooking the city skyline, Johnny turned to her. "Ash, I think it's time we go back." Ashley blinked. "Back where?" Johnny gave her a knowing smile. "Millbrook." She froze. Millbrook. The town that never believed in her. The place where people had mocked them, dismissed them, doubted them. "Why would we go back?" she asked hesitantly. Johnny sighed. "Because they need to see what happens when you don't give up. They need to see you." Ashley chewed on her lip. "And what if they still don't respect me?" Johnny cupped her face gently. "Then we walk in there, heads high, knowing we proved them wrong." Ashley searched his eyes, and after a long pause, she nodded. "Let's go home." The town that had to swallow its words. They arrived in Millbrook on a crisp Saturday afternoon. As soon as they pulled onto Main Street, heads turned. People who once whispered behind their backs now stared outright. Mrs. Thompson, the grocery store owner who had dismissed Ashley years ago, nearly dropped a carton of eggs when she saw her step out of the car. Mr. Evans, the butcher, rubbed his eyes as if he was seeing a ghost. And Johnny's old friend, Mike, who once told him Ashley's dream was a waste of time, nearly choked on his coffee. Ashley Carter was back. But she wasn't the struggling girl they once knew. She was a force. A woman who had made it. And they couldn't ignore her anymore. Johnny's parents. A moment of reckoning. The real test, however, came when Johnny and Ashley pulled into his parents' driveway. Johnny's father, who once told him he was throwing his future away, stood at the door, arms crossed. His mother, eyes filled with something between guilt and relief, stepped forward first. "Johnny, Ashley, you came back." Johnny exhaled. "Yeah, Mom, we did." His father cleared his throat. He looked at Ashley, then at Johnny. "I saw you on a billboard the other day." Ashley lifted a brow. "Did you?" His father gave a stiff nod. "You, look like you belong there." Ashley smirked. "I do." Silence. Then his father let out a slow sigh. "I was wrong." Ashley's breath caught. Johnny's mother wiped a tear from her eye. "We should have believed in you, Ashley. We should have supported you both." Ashley studied them, waiting. And then, Johnny's father did something she never expected. He stepped forward, extended his hand, and met her gaze. "I'm proud of you." Ashley's throat tightened. She didn't need their approval anymore. She had made it without them. But hearing those words, it still mattered. She shook his hand. "Thank you." And for the first time, they weren't outsiders in Millbrook anymore. They were proof that success couldn't be stopped. Not by doubt. Not by judgment. And certainly not by fear. Turning their story into a legacy. That evening, as Ashley and Johnny walked through town, something dawned on her. She had spent years proving herself. But now, it was time to help others do the same. She turned to Johnny, excitement in her eyes. "What if we give back?" Johnny frowned. "What do you mean?" Ashley took a deep breath. "A school. A program. Something for girls like me. Girls with dreams, but no support." Johnny's face lit up. "You mean, teach them everything we had to learn the hard way?" Ashley nodded. "I don't want the next girl from a small town to be told she's not enough. I want her to walk into her dreams already knowing her worth." Johnny grinned. "Ashley Carter's Modeling Academy." Ashley laughed. "Sounds fancy." Sounds perfect. And just like that, they had a new dream to chase. But this time, they weren't chasing it alone. They were building something bigger than themselves, something that would change lives. Because success wasn't just about proving people wrong. It was about lifting others up with you, and that's exactly what they were going to do. Together, a legacy that will never fade. Ashley Carter and Johnny Miller had fought for everything they had. They had battled prejudice, rejection, and doubt. They had built their dreams from nothing, proving the world wrong every step of the way. Now, they were ready for something bigger, something that would outlive their fame, something that would change lives forever. Because true success wasn't just about making it. It was about helping others rise too. And that's exactly what they were about to do. The school that would change everything. Ashley had been dreaming of this for years. A place where young girls, especially those who were overlooked, doubted, or told they weren't the right type, could learn, grow, and step into their power. A place where no one would ever say, "Not quite what we're looking for." So she and Johnny did what they had always done. They built it from the ground up. The Carter Miller Academy for Aspiring Models and Entrepreneurs was more than just a modeling school. It was a movement. They didn't just teach girls how to walk a runway. They taught them how to own every room they entered. They didn't just show them how to pose for a camera. They taught them how to stand tall in a world that wanted to shrink them. They didn't just give them skills. They gave them belief. Belief that they were worthy. Belief that they were capable. Belief that their dreams were just as valid as anyone else's. And as the school opened its doors, young girls from all over came, hungry to learn, eager to fight for their place in the world. For the first time in their lives, they had a chance. A real chance. And Ashley, she made sure that they never felt alone in their journey. Because she knew what that loneliness felt like. And she would never let another girl feel it again. The letter that changed everything. One afternoon, as Ashley was going through applications for the academy, she received an envelope in the mail. There was no return address, just her name, handwritten in elegant script. She opened it slowly, curiosity prickling at her skin. Inside was a letter. And as she began to read, tears welled up in her eyes. "Dear Ashley, you don't know me, but I know you. I know the girl who sat in audition rooms, being judged by people who never saw her worth. I know the girl who was told her dreams were impossible. I know the girl who walked through town with her head high, even when the world tried to beat her down. I know her because I am her. I am a young girl from a small town where dreams aren't supposed to come true. But then I saw you. I saw a woman who looked like me on billboards. I saw a woman who came from nothing and made the world listen. I saw a woman who refused to give up. And for the first time in my life, I believed that maybe, just maybe, I could do it, too. Thank you for proving that we belong in this world. Sincerely, a girl who now believes in herself." Ashley pressed the letter to her chest, her heart full. This was why she fought. This was why she never gave up. It had never just been about her. It was about every girl who had ever been told no. And as she wiped her tears, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Johnny's greatest gift. The night before their wedding anniversary, Johnny had a surprise for Ashley. "Dress up," he said with a mischievous grin. "I'm taking you somewhere special." Ashley laughed, but she played along. When she stepped out of the bedroom in a sleek black dress, Johnny's eyes darkened with admiration. "Dan," he murmured, "you just keep getting more beautiful." She smirked. "Flattery will get you everywhere, Mr. Miller." He took her hand. "Then let's go." They drove through the city, winding through streets Ashley barely recognized, until Johnny pulled into a quiet lot. Ashley frowned. It was a building, a restaurant, and when she looked up at the sign, her breath hitched. "Milier and TRTR, El Resto, Nurant Bual to All in Love." She turned to Johnny, her hands covering her mouth. "Johnny, what is this?" His voice was soft but full of emotion. It's ours, Ash. A place that's not just mine, not just yours. Ours. Tears spilled down Ashley's cheeks. You bought this for us. Johnny chuckled. I built it for us, just like we've built everything else together. Ashley threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. Because this wasn't just a restaurant. It was proof that no matter how far they went, no matter how big they got, they would always be Ashley and Johnny. Two kids from a small town. Two dreamers who refused to let the world define them. Two fighters. And now, they had built something that would last forever. The final walk. A year later, Ashley received an invitation that would close one chapter and begin another. She had been invited to walk in the biggest fashion show in the world. But this time, it wasn't just about her. Because as she stepped onto that runway, she wasn't just Ashley Carter. She was every girl who had ever been told no. She was every dreamer who had been laughed at. She was proof that you don't have to fit into their mold. You break it. And as she reached the end of the runway, she did something no model ever did. She stopped. She looked straight into the cameras. And she held up a single sign. A sign that made headlines across the world. A sign that changed everything. It read, "A for EV or a girl who is EV or TOLD, Nino, THIS, I is FORU." The crowd erupted. The cameras flashed. And in that moment, Ashley Carter had done more than just walk a runway. She had made history. And as she stepped off the stage, Johnny was waiting. With pride in his eyes, with love in his heart, and with the knowledge that no matter how big the world got, they had won. Together. Forever. The end. But also the beginning. Because dreams never really end. They grow. They inspire. And they live on in those who dare to believe. And Ashley Carter, she made sure the world would never forget her name. Or the love story that had built her legacy. Because love was the dream that had mattered most of all. And she had finally made it come true.